All right, well, here's a few news articles that were interesting. Of course, the only news that's been hitting everywhere for the last few days is Ukraine. Now it is extremely clear that the Russian soldiers are acting just like the Nazis, killing innocent civilians, torturing people, rape, theft, murder, which apparently is standard for Russians. I've heard about this for years, but now they're getting caught on cell phones and videos. And so Biden is very vigorously condemning Putin as a war criminal, saying he should go on trial for this. And I'm very pleased to see it and proud. I think he's doing a good job in Ukraine. I don't think he did a good job in Afghanistan, but in Ukraine, I've seen the United States vigorously on the right side of this, which is not a small thing. It was not so clear what side we'd be on in World War II, and I must say I'm not so sure that Trump would have chosen this side. Trump was pretty much inclined to stick with Putin and blame Ukraine. So anyway, it's, I think, a very good thing that Biden's in charge for this crisis. And yes, that's everyone has had this from Russians, which is amazing. They don't equip their soldiers, they don't train their soldiers, and they just let them commit war crimes and do nothing about it. And that's another area where I didn't agree with Trump. Trump violated the military chain of command to pardon Americans who committed war crimes who were being punished. We don't let our soldiers do this and get away with it, except when Trump is in power, and then we do. And I think it's good for us to have the moral high ground and not let our soldiers do these awful things. So anyway, this I thought was very interesting. They took Fox viewers, which, as I think all of us in America know, if you are not a MAGA type, then it, like all liberals like me, or I think I'm actually what you used to call a Republican 5 or 10 years ago, but anyway, these days that's a liberal. And it seems to me like people watch Fox News and they go insane. They join a cult. They lose all sense of right and wrong and up and down and believe lies. And there doesn't seem to be anything to do about it. But these social scientists tried paying people $15 an hour. Let me get rid of this nonsense. Okay. They decided to pay people $15 an hour to watch 7 hours a week of CNN instead of Fox. And they found that if they did that for 30 days, they would in fact change their viewpoint significantly. They began to believe that COVID was actually dangerous and not just a hoax. They began to believe things like the insurrection actually mattered and wasn't just a hoax and things like that. It's very interesting. So it really is. And that's why they asked people like, I think they asked the Prime Minister of New Zealand why they don't have a similar right wing there. And she said, because we did not let Rupert Murdoch come into our country and poison our people with his terrible fake news. And that appears to be very much true. And I would have thought, anyway, it's I think this is something that the advertising industry figured out years ago, is you think you're smart. I think I'm smart. I can watch TV and I can just say, well, I know they're lying to me, but they know it's not true. They know if they put up pictures of people smoking cigarettes and dancing in the field, even though you intellectually say, those cigarettes don't make you happy and healthy and make you dance in a field like that, it hits you emotionally at a subliminal level. So I think if the news you watch goes into you like bloodstream and you believe it, even if you think you're smart enough to reject it. Anyway, NewsHour talked about difference in war crimes, crimes against humanity, genocide. Well, that's interesting. Yeah, I know, because I remember they asked Biden if they committed genocide. He said, well, I think it's war crimes. I think it's not genocide. And then I saw a guy on Twitter saying, I'm an expert on genocide, and this is genocide, and I don't know exactly what it takes to be genocide. So, yeah, that's... Isn't this a form of censure? What, Beach? A form of censure? I don't know what you're referring to. You mean having people watch a different news channel? Or maybe something else. Anyway, I thought that was very interesting. It does strongly suggest that if we could somehow get people... This is what you do with cults, too. When you don't allow Rupert Murdoch. Yes, that's censorship. And so it's very difficult to do in America because of our First Amendment. And it's very difficult to do online and so on. Yes, absolutely. But we do seem to be suffering the consequences of our free speech policy. The coordinated inauthentic speech gets us in trouble. Anyway, this I thought was interesting, talking about the New World Order, and they had a quote from Henry Kissinger, who is very smart, and he said there never has been a world order. He describes the various things that have been called world orders, which he said were in fact invented. He said the thing we're currently calling a world order was just invented in Germany a few centuries ago with very few people participating in the decision. And the interesting thing is many people are not on board. And he said, for example, the Mideast never agreed to our pushing democracy over autocracy. And I must say, from looking at what happened in Afghanistan, they have a point. They say, democracy does not work for us. Autocracy is the kind of government we're used to that works for us, and telling us that that's wrong is not going to help us. And remember, we tried democracy in Russia and capitalism, and it was a disaster. Their society is not appropriate for it or ready for it or something. And so this is why, in a way, the current dialogue that I hear, where we are going to promote democracy over autocracy and save the world, is perhaps misguided. We might need to think more carefully about what it is we're trying to protect. I'd rather see us protect something like human rights and freedom, perhaps. But in a way, it is not logical to expect everybody to become a democracy overnight, or maybe ever. A bunch of nations just don't have the traditions that are necessary to hold it up. Just like America, for example, does not have the traditions to hold up socialism. I think we should have socialized medicine, but our culture just doesn't seem to support it. I think we should have socialized medicine and not private gun ownership. And our culture is just rejecting both of those things, even if they're good ideas. And I think in other nations they reject democracy similarly. It just doesn't fit, even if it might be a good idea. Will two powers emerge, U.S. and China? Well, I think they already have. Yes, I think it's U.S. and China. And I think what's happening is Russia is in big trouble. But anyway, Russia still has its allies. And one of the allies that really surprised me was Israel. Israel is clinging to Russia and supporting Russia. And I asked my friends what's going on here, and they pointed out what's going on here is Syria. Israel needs Russia in Syria, so they don't want to condemn Russia in Ukraine. And that's the kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place that you get into if you are too dependent on other nations. And this is why I really want us to get off fossil fuels, because if we keep having to burn all this oil, not only do we poison our children with the pollution, but we also end up having to jump in bed with somebody we probably don't really want to be tied to. It's either Russia or Saudi Arabia or Venezuela or somebody, and we really should knock that off. Anyway, so Elon Musk. Nobody knows quite what Elon Musk is all about, but he feels censored on Twitter, so he just became the number one stakeholder in Twitter. He just bought 9% of Twitter, which is more than any one other person. So apparently he's going to try and influence Twitter and change it into something like him. So, yeah, Syria is a proxy war between Israel and Iran, yeah. And now Ukraine is a proxy war between the U.S. and Russia. Or between NATO and Russia, but a lot of it's the U.S., also Poland. Yeah. Anyway, that's all the news. Let me stop that.